So today we're going to be going over lizard tails in regeneration. This is going to be done by me, Garrett Nemeth, and then Dylan Mack and Eric Posadas. So what are the normal tail functions and what's their importance? So in normal tails, they're going to be used for swimming, for climbing, the balance on the tree so they don't fall out. You wouldn't want that. And also helps them to move quicker. Their tails can also be used for fat storage. So in their tails, they can hold the fat, and this can be used for energy. So if they're running around, they have the energy to do so. And it can also be used as a status symbol. So if a lizard has its tail, it can be used for attracting mates because the female lizards are going to see a healthy lizard and maybe consider him to mate. So without tails, they're going to run slower, they're going to climb slower, they may fall out of trees because they don't have their balance. They won't be able to swim, obviously, because they can't use their tail to paddle. They will not have energy to move quick, also because they can use their tail to swing back and forth to be able to move quick. And also, without their fat storage in their tails, they will not be able to run around as much because they won't have the energy to do so. This also may limit their mating. If a female lizard sees a lizard without its tail, it will probably think maybe something's wrong with it, or they just won't consider it. And also, it can lead to a high risk of predation because, as we will talk about later, they use their tail as a defense mechanism or a distraction for predators. So now we're going to be talking about a normal lizard tail. They use this in a bending motion to help propel themselves forward, and they can use this to gain speed. What is also in the lizard tails, like we talked about, is fat stores, your vertebral bones, which is your backbone, or also skeletal muscles. So these are muscles that connect to your skeleton. And then blood vessels, of course, because the tails need blood to survive. And there's going to also be scales on your tail, or on the lizard tail, sorry. And there's also muscles and nerves in your normal tail that allows for short movements and specific movements, so they can move their tails around to help them move like we talked about. And then we also have this video. And then we have a little quiz time for you guys. So we're going to ask the question, which of these lizards cannot regrow its tail? And that's going to be between the leaf-tailed gecko, the savanna monitor lizard, the green anole, and the leopard gecko. I'll give you guys a few seconds to answer that. So if you said savanna monitor lizard, you are correct. And we will talk about this later, but typically the larger lizards do not have the ability to regrow their tails.
So just a few species that can regenerate their tails. Number one, you have the leopard gecko, which you can see right here to the right. Number two, you have the day gecko down here in the bottom right corner. Number three, you have the house gecko, which I don't have a picture of, but it's the little geckos that you might see all the time running around your house. Number four is the tokay gecko, which is the blue gecko up here in the top right corner. Number five is the blue-tongued skink, which is up here in the top left corner. Number six is the green iguana, which you can see in the middle of the left side. And number seven and number eight are the brown and green anoles. There's a picture of a brown anole on the bottom left side here. Generally, most of your gecko species and your anole species can regrow their tail with few exceptions, such as the crested gecko. Those cannot regrow their tails. Once they drop it, it stays gone. So why might a lizard drop its tail? A lizard performs what is called autonomy on themselves, which in Greek means self-sever. So when they do this, they will cut off their own tails on purpose if they're grabbed by a predator or being chased. The main reason to doing this is the tail will still wiggle, as you can see in the GIF. And so when it does that, it can trick predators or distract them because they see a little wiggling tail and they don't know what it is. And so it can allow the lizard to escape. So, why is this important? In medicine, they are looking into how lizards do this because there are many people who may have injuries where they're missing limbs. And they might have spinal injuries and are paralyzed. And they've actually found that some lizards have the ability to regenerate cardiac muscle or your heart muscle and brain matter as well, which we as humans cannot really do that efficiently. Um, and we need to definitely know how this works because for any of those who have seen Spider-Man, we don't need somebody who doesn't completely understand it to try to do this and turn into a giant lizard because we don't have our own Spider-Man to help fix that problem. So a little fun fact, although alligators are not technically lizards, they are their own group. It has been found out that some, specifically young American alligators, can actually regrow their tails. So this makes them the largest known animal with regeneration.
So what is lizard regeneration? So the lizard will regrow its tail when it drops it, or if it's cut off by a predator or anything like that. And so this will only happen in certain species like we talked about earlier. And so lizards, like monitor lizard types, like Komodo dragons and things like that, they actually cannot properly regenerate their tails. And so when they drop their tail or if they get a trauma to it that leads to it being cut off, the first 10 days of that is spent healing the wound and covering up the stump with scales. And then around day 15, once it's covered, it starts to make a protrusion. And then all the way up to day 60, that protrusion evolves and evolves, making a large cartilage tube and muscle formations and nerves that go all the way up this new formed tail. And at the end of the 60 days, a stiff cartilage tube with nerves, blood vessels, and everything has been regrown and a new tail is formed. So as stated there, the regenerated lizard tail has a large cartilaginous rod, which replaces their vertebrae. And so the amount of skeletal muscle that is attached to this giant rod is actually changed depending on how much fat was stored in the pre-growth. And then the muscles and nerves and all of that are much longer. And this leads to reduced movement and reduced control over their tail. And so some lizards are actually able to regenerate parts of their tail. And so it was once thought that they could only regenerate where it was dropped, so where there's a proper vertebrae. But it's now been shown that you can regenerate based in areas where it has been dropped already. And so as you can see in the picture, part A is something that is the first regeneration, and then B, you see that it's a second regeneration, and then in part C, that's a third regeneration. And it gets smaller, but it also becomes more smooth and scale-like as it goes on. And that is the end of the presentation, and these are our citations.